Seches Bava Kamma Daf Chaf. The Gemara continues with its analysis of the halachos of regel and comparing it to keren. When does something qualify as regel? When does it qualify as keren? Nafkamin, of course, will be that regel is only chayiv in rishus hanizik, not in rishus harabim. So if something is in rishus harabim and it's regel, it is putter. And keren, of course, is chatzi nezik in the beginning and not nezik shalim, but it is both in rishus hanizik and in rishus harabim. So the Gemara first brings an incident that happened with a goat which saw a turnip on top of a barrel and climbed up the barrel in order to eat the turnip. It ate the turnip and broke the barrel. So that would seem to be a not normal activity, but Rava says that Yechayiv Nezik Shalim for both of these because it is normal and therefore it is Shane. The reason that it's normal is because since it's normal for it to eat a turnip, it's normal for it to go to all kinds of lengths to get to the turnip itself. Next halacha the Gemara brings from Ilfa, who says that if there's an animal in Rishus Harabim and it stretches its neck and it eats something off the back of another animal, that is chayiv. Now, why should it be chayiv if it's eating? Eating in Rishus Harabim is shein, is pater in Rishus Harabim. The Gemara says because the food which was on the back of the other animal is considered to be like it was in Rishus Yachid, and since the place in which it is being eaten from is Rishus Yachid, therefore you're chayiv for it. So we're saying maybe you can bring a proof to this. You have a case where somebody has a sack slung over his shoulder behind him, and an animal is stretching its neck and eating from the sack, so you chayav for that. So that would be the same indication that the reason you're chayav is because it's like it's in Rishus Hayachid, since it's on the back of that individual. So my answer is no. What happened was that it had to jump in order to reach it, and therefore it is not normal. It's not orche. It's actually chayav because it's keren, not because it's Rishus Hayachid. So what it says here also could be that it jumped, and therefore it's a proof that you're chayav for that jump specifically. Now, the Gemara says, where do we find where Rava says this halacha, that something like that is considered to be that it jumped? So, Gemara quotes Rav Oishia, says if you have an animal in Rishus Harabim that was walking and eating its pater, but if it stopped and it's eating, then it's chayiv. What's the difference? The difference is, if it stopped and it's eating, it's probably jumping to reach. Or it's talking about where it jumped in order to reach. And that's Rava's explaining that it jumped in order to reach, and therefore it's not orche, and therefore it's keren, and therefore it's chayiv even Rishus Harabim. Next, the Gemara says that Rav Zer has a question: what happens if something is moving from Rishus Yachid into Rishus Harabim? So the case is, the Gemara explains, you have an animal which puts something in its mouth in Rishus Yachid, and as it's traveling to the Rishus Harabim, it's eating it. So the taking was in Rishus Yachid, but the actual eating was in Rishus Harabim. Does that count? Do we ascribe the entire activity to the place where it took it in its mouth, which is Rishus Yachid, and it's chayiv for shein? Or do we follow where it actually ate it, and it's Rishus Harabim, and it's pater for shein? So that's a question that Rabbi Zera asks. So we want to bring a proof, because we have a halacha that was said by Rav Chia. If there is a big bundle of something which is partially in Rishus Harabim and partially in... it is partially in and partially out, meaning partially in Rishus Harabim and partially in Rishus Yachid. And the ruling over there is that if it ate the inside, then it's chayiv, and if it ate the outside, then it's pater. Meaning if it ate Rishus Yachid, which is Rishus Nizik, then it's chayiv. If it ate Rishus Harabim, then it's pater, because shein Rishus Harabim is pater. Now the Gemara understands that it ate the entire thing, but the animal was standing in Rishus Yachid, the animal standing in Rishus Harabim, and therefore the actual chewing and eating happened in the Rishus Yachid, in the Rishus Harabim. So you see that you follow the place where the eating happened and not the place where the actual taking of it happened. So Gemara answers no, that's not the case. The case is where we're saying a split. The part which was, you really follow the place where it's taken. The part of the grain in the part of the bundle which was in Rishus Yachid is taken from Rishus Yachid, and therefore you chayiv for that. And the other part is in Rishus Harabim, and you follow where it's taking, which is in Rishus Harabim, and you're pater for that. Second answer the Gemara gives is that we're talking about a very long object, and therefore you could view it on either end. The object itself, each grain is a long, thin grass, and it sticks partially in Rishus Harabim, partially in Rishus Harabim, and it's considered to be fully in the place where it's going to go. So if the animal's in Rishus Yachid, it's pulling it to Rishus Yachid, we view the entire thing as if it's in Rishus Yachid already, even though part of it is in Rishus Harabim. And if it's in Rishus Harabim, then we view it as all in Rishus Harabim. If the animal is in Rishus Harabim, we view it all as if it's in Rishus Harabim, because it's going to go in that direction. And therefore that's what the halacha is. Gemara now refers back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah we had listed shein where the animal eats something normal, and where the animal eats something which is not normal, and therefore it's keren. It's not a normal thing to eat, like if it's eating clothing or blankets, And after these two things, the Gemara says this is only in Rishos HaNizik, but in Rishos HaRabim you pater. So we want to know, you pater in Rishos HaNizik is by something, in Rishos HaRabim, your pater that's only for Shane, which is normal, or you pater even for Karen, which is not normal. What would be the reason you would be pater for Karen? If it's not normal, Karen is chayev in Rishos HaRabim. So the Gemara brings a machlekes on the subject. The Gemara says, the Rav says you're here, you would be pater even if he ate ksus and kalim in the Rishos HaRabim, even if he ate something which is abnormal in the Rishos HaRabim, you would be pater for it, even though it's abnormal and should be Karen, and Karen is generally chayiv in the Rishos HaRabim. Here you're pater, and the reason is because of a concept called kol mashana b'achar v'shina by pater. If you do something weird and somebody else does something weird which causes a damage, the second person is pater because you started the problem here with doing something weird in the first place. So whoever left his clothing in the middle of the street, that's doing something mashana, that's called mashana. So b'achar v'shina, if an animal comes along and eats it, so he's pater because you did something mashana first to bring the circumstance about. That's Rav's opinion. The Gemara says it's also the opinion of Rish Lakish. Shmuel disagrees, does not hold of kol mashana, and he says when the Mishnah says that you are chayiv in Rishos HaYachin and pater in Rishos HaRabim, it's going only on eating normal things like fruits and vegetables. Eating clothing, you'd be chayiv even in Rishos HaRabim, chatzi nezek, because it would be Karen. Now, Rish Lakish, we said, holds of kol mashana. The Gemara says that Rish Lakish shows this halacha in another place. Rish Lakish said if you have two animals, both in Rishos HaRabim, one is lying down and one is walking. So if the one that is lying down kicks the one that is walking, so it's chayev for it, it's Karen, it's an attack, and it's chayev chatzi nezek in Rishos HaRabim. If it's the other way, the one that's walking kicks the one that's lying down, then he's pater. The reason is because what is the animal doing lying down in Rishos HaRabim? That's a kol mashana. That's doing something mashinoi. So if someone comes along and kicks it, is kol mashana b'achar v'shinoi. And Rish Lakish holds that you're pater for that. Now Rabbi Yechanan disagrees on this. Rabbi Yechanan says that the Mishnah is only talking about pears and yerakos, only fruits and vegetables which are normal to eat. That is the situation in which you would be pater in Rishos HaRabim because it is shein. However, if it was ksus and kalim, which is weird, then you would be chayiv. If there was no kol mashana b'achar v'shinoi is pater. So Mara says, does Rabbi Yechanan not hold of Rish Lakish in the case of the two cows, the one which is standing or walking, it kicks the one that's lying down, or Rabbi Yechanan say that you're chayiv there, even though it's called mashana b'achar v'shinoi? So Mara says no. That Rabbi Yechanan could agree over there, and he agrees to the concept of kol mashana b'achar v'shinoi. However, he says that it's not abnormal to leave or to place your clothing spread out of Rishos HaRabim for a short time. People readjust the burdens and the bundles that they're carrying, and for that reason, you could very normally spread it out, and an animal could come along and eat it, and that would be a simple case of shinoi, not a kol mashana, and therefore you'd be chayiv for it even in Rishos HaRabim. The Gemara moves on to the next line in the Mishnah, where we saw as far as repaying shein. So generally, the animal needs to pay the damage to whatever it caused. Says the Gemara, if there is a benefit that the animal receives that it didn't have to eat, and its owner didn't have to feed it, then you pay for that. You don't pay for the damages; you pay for that amount. So we want to know, how do you calculate that? So we're going to quote some machlokes between Rabbah and Rava. Do you view how much of his normal feed he saved, and it doesn't matter what he ate? You look at his normal feed. Or do you look at the thing he ate and pay for the cheapest amount of that thing? So, for example, if he ate something expensive like barley, you would evaluate the cheapest going rate on the market for the barley, and that's what he would need to pay for. However, if you held like the other opinion, like Rava, then you would say, you don't look at the barley. What does he usually feed him? He usually feeds him amir, a very cheap grain. So how much grain, how much amir does he save? That's how much he needs to pay. That's how he has to pay. So says the Gemara, we learned the brisa like each of these two opinions. Learned the brisa like Rava. The says you only pay for the value of the amir alone. That's first. And we have a brisa that says like Rava. It says that if there's hana, you pay for the hana. How do you evaluate that? If it ate one kav or two kavs, you don't say pay the value of one or two kavs. You evaluate how much a person would pay to give such a thing to his animal, cheapest going rate that he would accept, even if it's not standard food or something that he wouldn't usually eat. So if the hana they had is something which is not normal for him to eat at all, that a person would never pay to feed that to his animal, he ends up not having to pay that at all. The Gemara now introduces the famous sugya of kaifin al midas sidaim. So the Gemara says, Rav Chizda asked a question to Rabbi Bava Kamma. He said, you weren't with us in the evening when you were near us in the Beis Medrash when we asked a very good question. He said, what was the good question that you asked? He said if somebody lives in someone else's chutz or someone else's yard without permission, without his knowledge, does he have to pay for it or not? So now the Gemara says we have to figure out what the case here is exactly. There's two possibilities in two questions. Question number one: is this an apartment or is this a dwelling that is standard? It was there to be rented, and the owner was renting it out. And by this person living in it rent free, he's causing him to not be able to rent it out to others. So he's losing because of that. Or is it something that he never rented and therefore there's no loss? He wouldn't have rented it anyway. The other question is the person who's lived there, would he otherwise have had to pay rent? And therefore he gets a financial gain. Or did he have his own house, or he had access to other houses to borrow for free, and therefore he never would have paid, so he didn't gain anything. So there's two options in each, two questions, two options, a total of 4 situations. So the Gemara takes care of the easy ones first. So the Gemara says, first of all, if you're talking about where it was a chutzner which wasn't rented and a person which didn't rent, so he didn't gain, he didn't lose, then it was a chutzer. There's no reason, this one didn't gain, this one didn't lose, there's no reason he should have to pay. The opposite extreme is if it's a yard which is usually rented and a person that usually rents, so he lost and he gained, so he definitely has to pay. So those two cases are not the shayla. What's a shayla? Shayla is a case of zenen of a chutzer, that it was a person who would otherwise have had to pay rent, but it was a chutzer, it was a yard which is not generally rented, so he would not have rented it had this person not been there, and he didn't lose by him living there at all. So zen, and this one gains, chutzer, this one doesn't lose. So what is the psak? Did we say that the person who lived there could say, why should I pay you? I didn't cause you any loss. Or do we say that the other one can say to him, you have to pay me because you had hana from my thing, and therefore you owe me for that hana? That's the Gemara's shayla. It says the Gemara, he responded and he said that it's a Mishnah. What's a Mishnah? So he said, when you're going to serve me, then I'll tell you if you do a shekel's worth of service for me. So he folded up his handkerchief for him. He said, okay, where's the Mishnah? So he said, our Mishnah says that if an animal eats someone else's property, you pay for the hana. So you see, you pay only for the hana. You don't pay for the other amount that it caused the damage of, even if it got no hana. So you see, it has to be for hana. So you follow the hana, and if there's hana, you pay for the hana. So Gemara says, Bava commented, and he said that he should not have accepted that answer because it's not comparable at all. This case is not like our Mishnah. We were talking about a case of zenen and v'zelei chaser. Here it's zenen and v'zelei chaser. This one had enough from eating, and that person lost. So the Gemara says, no. Since the fruits are in Rishos Harabim, it was probably hefker. The person was mafker his fruits, so that's why he doesn't have to pay for the damages to the thing. But we're still saying that he has to pay for what he ate, even though it's zenen of zalei chaser. So you still see you do have to pay for zenen of zalei chaser. The Gemara now tries to bring more proofs about the question of zenen of zalei chaser. So the Gemara talks about a situation where someone has a field and someone else is surrounding his field on 3 sides. So you have Shimon in the middle, and Reuven surrounds him on all 3 sides, north, east, and west, and he builds a fence around his fields, which therefore also ends up fencing in Shimon's middle field on 3 sides. So what's the halacha there? Shimon, who's fencing on 3 sides, does not have to pay anything because his field is still open on the 4th side. These fences don't help him; they don't keep anything in. 3 fences is like no fences. So that's the halacha as long as he doesn't do anything about it. However, if he would fence him in on all 4 sides, that's if he would own fields around him on all 4 sides, and he would fence him in, it implies that he would have to pay his share. He would have to participate in the cost of the fencing, because his field ends up being fenced memela. So you see, even though the outer person, Ruvain, is not losing anything, and the inner person is gaining, it's zenen of zalei chaser, you still mechayiv him to pay. So Moshe says here it's different, because Ruvain can say, not for you, I wouldn't have had to put fences on the inside at all. I would just put my outer fences, and then that, because now he's encircling him on all 4 sides, I would just put my outer fences, and that would be enough. The fact that you are there is causing me to have to fence, so you should at least pay a chelik. Next slide the Gemara brings is from a similar case where Reuven has fences surrounding Shimon's field on 3 sides, and there that we have that the halacha is, Rav Yosi says that if Shimon gets up and fences his 4th side, that's he got 3 free sides from Reuven. Then he goes and does the 4th side, so it shows that he wants to use the 3 fences that were put up by Reuven. Now you make him pay for all of them. He has to pay a chelik in all those 3 fences. And the reason is because he showed that he wants it. Implication is, though, that if he didn't do it, but the Makav himself put up a fence on the 4th side, maybe he bought a field on that side and he put up a fence, that he would be potter from having to pay. It's only because Shimon put up the fence that he has to pay. So that's again a case of Zen and Chaser. Here he's potter. Says it's different because he could have said that if it would be up to me, I would only put a little fence of thorns or something. I wouldn't pay for such a dramatic, thick, strong fence, so I don't have to pay that much. Next try, I think Gemara brings us from a case where two people shared a two-story house. One on the bottom floor, one on the top floor, one on the ground floor, that is, one on the upper floor. Then the house collapsed, and they want to rebuild. So the owner of the upper floor wants to rebuild, the owner of the ground floor doesn't. So the upper floor can't rebuild his upper floor without there being a ground floor. So he goes ahead and he rebuilds the floor, and he lives in it as long as the person who owns the ground floor doesn't want to rebuild. So the person who owns the upper floor could live in the ground floor that he rebuilt. Now, if that person comes and says he wants it, he has to pay the expenses, and then the person who owned the upper floor before can build himself an upper floor on top. Says Gemara, you see, he only has to pay the expenses for the building. He doesn't have to pay rent for living there, even though it was theoretically that person's ground floor. It just took time for him to pay for it, but he doesn't have to pay for living there. Now, it's in and because that person didn't lose anything. He didn't even want to have the lower floor to that point. He didn't want to pay to rebuild. He didn't want to have it. And the upper person is nana because he's living there. But you see, he doesn't have to pay rent for that. So Zenev Zeli Chaser is potter. So Mar says, no, here it's different because the lower floor is meshuba to the upper floor. Part of the responsibility of owning a lower floor is that you have to provide a stable surface on which the guy could build his house on top of yours. And because you're obligated to provide that, you can't charge for the usage of that. Now, next proof the Gemara brings is from the same case, except that it's different as Shita. That's what Yehuda, who says that the one who lives in the lower floor, which here the Gemara calls he lives in the Chatzar, without the other person's knowledge, he has to pay rent. So Gemara says, you see, Zenev V'Zalei Chaser, and here he's Chayiv. Same case, same Zenev V'Zalei Chaser, but he holds as Chayiv. So Gemara says, no, it's different, because since it's a new house, it becomes not new. It gets a little bit of blackening of the walls. It loses the newness. It's not fresh and clean like it was never used. It becomes from new to used. And for that, you have to pay because there is a loss. It's then and it was a chaser. However, if it would be a house that's already been used, then it wouldn't be any significant loss and you wouldn't have to pay. The Gemara continues on this topic. The Gemara says that a message was sent from Be'er Ami. And he said, in the original case of Zen and V'Zalei Chaser, where someone lived in someone else's house without paying rent, and that person was not intending to rent it, but this person needed a place to stay, why should he have to pay? It didn't cause him any losses, no losses, no hezek. What's the problem? So Rabbi Bar Abba said, let's think about it. Later he said to Rabbi Bar Abba, and he said, you sent me all this, and you went. If there would be a reason, would you not have sent it? So Rav Kahana, so the Gemara now has two different versions of what Rav Yechanan said. Rav Kahana said in the name of Rav Yechanan, he doesn't have to pay. In the case of Zenan V'Zalei Chaser with the apartments, and Rabbi Avohu says in the name of Rav Yechanan, he has to pay. So Rav Papa says, this that Rabbi Avohu said in the name of Rav Yechanan, that he heard that Rav Yechanan had said that he has to pay. Rabbi Yechanan never actually said it explicitly. Rabbi Avohu figured it from something that he passed, and he was really wrong. What was the case? So it's based on a mission. The mission says if somebody is a gizbar for hektish, and he takes a rock or a beam from hektish, so he didn't do milah, he didn't transfer it out of hektish's rishus, because in his possession, he's holding it for hektish. So even though he took it for himself, it didn't leave hektish's rishus. Now, if he gives it to another person, now he's mal, because me'ilah is transferring from hektish rishus to a private rishus. So that's just what he just did. So he's chayv milah for that. Now that person's not mal because he just received it. He didn't do me'ilah. Now, if the gizbar built it into his house, it's also not mal yet because he didn't leave his rishus yet. But if now he uses it for his own private purposes, like he lives in it, lives under it, now as soon as he lives under it for the value of a shever pruta, he's mal. And so Shmuel over there says, and that's only if he used it as a blocker, as a shutter for a window, that is, he put it into an open window, and didn't do any actual shinoi in it. However, if he did a shinoi, so he built it in physically to the house, to the wall, then he's chayav right away. So now, Rabbi Vo said to Yechanan, so you see from here, he said in Shmuel, you see from here that someone lives in his friend's chutzner without his knowledge, then he has to pay for it, even though it's then and it was a chasser, because that's what's happening here. There's no knowledge of hektish here. The guy just built it into his house, and still we're being mechayev him. So Rabbi Yechanan didn't respond. So Rabbi Vo assumed that's because he agrees. Says the Gemara, no, he didn't really agree. He really didn't bother responding. It wasn't even worth disagreeing. It's because he holds like Rabbah that there's no such thing as doing something shalemidas hektish. Hektish belongs to Kadosh Baruch Hu, and Kadosh Baruch Hu knows everything. So there's no concept of Shalom Midas.